The morning of August 16, 1977, began like any other at Graceland. But by the time the sun reached its peak over Memphis, the mansion would be shrouded in silence, unlike anything it had ever known. Elvis Presley, arguably the most famous entertainer in the world, had been found lying on the floor of his private bathroom. Ginger Alden, his 20-year-old fiancée, stumbled into the room and saw him motionless, his body sprawled across the tile, his face pressed into the carpet. At first, she thought he might have collapsed from exhaustion. For months, Elvis had been battling a cycle of sleepless nights, heavy prescription use, and constant pressure from tours and business commitments. But as she shook him, calling his name, there was no response. The screams from Ginger echoed through the upstairs halls, summoning staff who quickly dialed for an ambulance. The paramedics arrived, their sirens cutting through the thick August humidity, but their efforts were futile. Attempts at resuscitation failed, and in those chaotic minutes, reality sank in. The king of rock and roll was gone. At just 42 years old, Elvis Presley was declared dead. The news traveled faster than anyone could process. By midday, television networks broke into regular programming, announcers speaking with hushed voices, their tone carrying the weight of disbelief. Radio stations across the country abandoned playlists and played nothing but Elvis songs, one after another. Reporters flooded Memphis, racing to Graceland's gates, where thousands of fans had already gathered. Some wept uncontrollably, collapsing onto the lawns. Others clutched Elvis records, holding them to their chest, as though the vinyl itself carried part of his spirit. People fainted in the heat, overcome by grief. For many, it felt like time had stopped. But alongside the grief came something else: unease. Even before the official statements were finalized, questions rippled through the crowds and the press. Witnesses inside Graceland whispered that Elvis had seemed alive and alert earlier that morning, seen speaking with staff. How could he be dead just hours later? The official word of a heart attack came swiftly, almost too swiftly, and while it explained the sudden collapse, medical experts would later suggest that the toxic cocktail of prescription drugs in his system could not be ignored. The embalming of his body was ordered almost immediately, raising eyebrows. Why the rush? Why such urgency to prepare the body before thorough examinations had been completed? Inside the Presley household, grief mixed with tension. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, was devastated. His face pale, his voice cracking as he tried to make decisions for the family. But some insiders recalled arguments among relatives and staff about how to handle the situation, as if not everyone agreed on what was to be done. The body was guarded carefully, access limited, and instructions were given in hushed tones. It was as though the family was trying not only to mourn, but to control what the world would be allowed to see. The following day, August 17th, Elvis's body was placed in an open casket for public viewing inside Graceland's foyer, beneath the ornate stained glass archways. Vernon Presley, believing that fans deserved a chance to say goodbye, gave his approval despite his grief. Security was tight. Lines stretched for blocks outside the mansion gates, and mourners were ushered in slowly, each given only a few seconds to look upon the king one final time. Those who entered described the scene in reverent but unsettled tones. Elvis lay dressed in a white suit with a blue tie, his hair neatly styled, his hands folded across his chest. But the more people looked, the stranger it seemed. His skin appeared too waxy, almost plastic, with an unnatural smoothness that defied the years of physical decline he had endured. His face seemed slimmer, more youthful, with a jawline sharper than fans remembered from his last performances. His nose appeared narrower, his features more refined. The hands, which so many had seen gripping microphones and guitars, now looked bloated and stiff. Some mourners exited the room, whispering to one another, hesitant to say aloud what they feared, that the man in the casket did not look like Elvis Presley at all. The unease grew stronger during the funeral the next day. The procession wound through the streets of Memphis, where tens of thousands lined the sidewalks, weeping, singing his songs, and throwing flowers onto the hearse as it passed. The display of grief was immense, but privately, more people admitted that something about the body seemed too perfect, too staged, as though Elvis's final appearance had been crafted for presentation rather than reality. In the days that followed, rumors circulated that the casket had not remained sealed after the funeral, but had been reopened in private. Some insisted this was simply for embalming adjustments, but others believed Vernon Presley ordered it out of doubt, or even fear. Whispers claimed that the body inside looked different when viewed the second time, its skin tone shifting unnaturally, its features altered. For some, this was the ultimate confirmation that what lay in the casket may not have been Elvis at all. It was around this time that the most disturbing theory took root, that the Presley family had used a wax dummy in place of Elvis's actual body. The details seemed to support it. Observers described the face as too polished, the skin as sculpted rather than flesh. A strange bead of sweat was noticed on the forehead, which should have been impossible on an embalmed corpse. Even the morticians who claimed to have worked on him gave conflicting statements, some insisting the embalming was rushed, others suggesting they never saw the process firsthand. The inconsistencies only fueled suspicion. Out of these whispers grew the Elvis Lives movement, a phenomenon that still persists decades later. If the body in the casket was not Elvis, then where was he? Reports of sightings exploded. Elvis at airports, Elvis buying a ticket to Argentina, Elvis driving a limousine in Las Vegas, Elvis speaking on the phone late at night. Though tabloids embellished these stories, many fans clung to them, convinced that Elvis had staged his own death to escape fame, financial troubles, or failing health. The official autopsy should have silenced these rumors, but instead it intensified them. Initially, the medical examiner declared the cause of death as a sudden cardiac arrhythmia. Soon, however, toxicology reports revealed a staggering list of drugs in his system: painkillers, barbiturates, sedatives, all in significant amounts. Instead of releasing all the findings, authorities sealed large portions of the report for 50 years. Missing pages, redacted details, and conflicting statements from doctors left the public with more questions than answers. Why hide the truth? Was it to protect Elvis's reputation, or because the autopsy revealed something that did not match the man in the coffin? Adding to the suspicion were the testimonies of those closest to the event. Morticians, funeral staff, and even security guards privately admitted that the body looked artificial. One funeral worker flatly stated, "That wasn't the king I worked for," pointing out that the features were too stiff. The sideburns looked glued on, and the body slimmer than the Elvis he had last seen. Fans echoed these claims, insisting that the face looked too perfect, the hands unnaturally swollen. A guard assigned to Graceland during the funeral later claimed that the real body had been kept from public view altogether, and that what thousands saw was a substitute. The Presley family's behavior only deepened the mystery. Vernon Presley grew protective, insisting on tight security around the casket, forbidding access to anyone outside a chosen circle. His interviews contained contradictions, at one moment describing the body as peaceful, at another admitting that adjustments had been necessary because something didn't look right. Priscilla Presley avoided direct questions about the casket altogether, even years later when speaking openly about other aspects of her life with Elvis. Lisa Marie, only 9 years old at the time, would later offer inconsistent recollections, sometimes firm in her memories, other times hesitant, as though even she sensed something was off. Other relatives offered their own contradictions, some swearing it was Elvis, others admitting in private that they too were unsettled. For many, the funeral and burial did not close the chapter on Elvis's life, but opened one of the most enduring mysteries in music history. The body's strange appearance, the rushed embalming, the sealed autopsy files, the conflicting testimonies, and the evasive responses of his family all combined into a narrative that refused to rest in peace. And so, nearly half a century later, the question lingers like an echo through time. What exactly lay inside Elvis Presley's casket? Was it truly the king of rock and roll, a man broken by years of fame, excess, and prescription drugs? Or was it something else entirely? A carefully constructed illusion meant to hide a truth the world was never supposed to see?